So while the headlines scream about getting tough with China, the reality behind closed doors is exactly the opposite. America is trapped in a financial dependency so profound that they cannot afford to truly confront their supposed enemy. This is what I call the debtor's paradox. You cannot declare war on your banker, you cannot sanction your creditor, you cannot threaten someone who holds the deed to your house. But here's the detail that keeps me awake at night. This isn't just about economics anymore. This is about the fundamental architecture of global power collapsing in real time. For 80 years, American hegemony rested on two pillars: the petrodollar system and the treasury bond market. Venezuela has just proven you can shatter the first pillar and thrive. China is proving that the second pillar was always an illusion. The petrodollar deal was elegant in its simplicity. America protects you militarily. You price your oil in dollars, forcing everyone to hold dollars to buy energy. But when you weaponize that system, when you use it for regime change and economic warfare, you destroy the trust that made it possible.
I've come across a very interesting video from this Russian man called Yanni. I want us to watch this particular video. I will be back.
I want to tell you something that happened last Tuesday at 3:47 a.m. Washington time, something that will never appear in the official State Department briefings, but something that reveals just how far the American empire has fallen. I was reviewing classified cable summaries when I noticed an unusual pattern. High-level Treasury officials were making unscheduled calls to Beijing, not through normal diplomatic channels, but through backdoor financial networks. The kind of calls you make when you're desperate. The kind of calls empires make when they're no longer empires. But let me start from the beginning, because what I'm about to tell you connects three dots that the mainstream media refuses to connect: the secret negotiations in Caracas, the panicked phone calls to Beijing, and the quiet liquidation of American hegemony happening right under our noses. You see, there's an old rule in international finance that I learned during my years as Greece's finance minister. When you're negotiating from a position of strength, you meet in marble halls with photographers present. When you're negotiating from desperation, you meet in hotel rooms at midnight with no witnesses. And right now, American officials are spending a lot of time in hotel rooms. The Venezuela story broke my heart because I've seen this movie before. In 2015, when I was fighting the Troika, I watched powerful institutions use economic warfare against smaller nations. But what's happening now is different. This time, the economic warfare has backfired spectacularly. Let me paint you the picture. For 5 years, Washington treated Nicolas Maduro like a cartoon villain. They froze his assets, seized his planes, put a bounty on his head like some Wild West fantasy. The goal was simple: collapse Venezuela's economy, install a puppet government, and secure control over the world's largest oil reserves. But here's what the brilliant strategists in Washington didn't calculate. When you sanction someone's oil, you don't just hurt them. You teach them to survive without you. And Venezuela learned that lesson perfectly. While American officials were giving speeches about democracy and human rights, Venezuelan oil kept flowing. To China, paid in yuan. To India, paid in rupees. To Turkey, paid in gold. They created the world's first post-dollar oil market, proving to every resource-rich nation that you can break free from the dollar system and survive. Now comes the humiliation. Those same American officials who called Maduro a dictator are quietly returning to Caracas. They're offering sanctions relief, they're issuing waivers to Chevron, they're essentially begging the man they tried to overthrow to please turn the pumps back on. Why? Because American refineries are choking. You see, Texas produces plenty of oil, but it's light sweet crude. The massive refinery infrastructure on the Gulf Coast was built decades ago to process heavy sour crude. Without Venezuelan heavy oil, these refineries can't produce enough diesel. And without diesel, the American supply chain stops. But if the Venezuela situation is embarrassing, what's happening with China is absolutely terrifying. While diplomats are begging for oil, the Treasury is begging for cash. And this is where our story gets truly bizarre. The United States needs to sell $3 trillion in new debt this year, just to keep functioning. $3 trillion. Let that number sink in. Scott Bessent, the new Treasury Secretary, wakes up every morning facing an impossible equation. He needs to find buyers for an astronomical amount of American debt. But his traditional customers are walking away. Japan, historically America's most reliable debt buyer, is in crisis. They're not buying American bonds, they're selling them to defend their own currency. Europe is stagnant, fighting recession. American banks are already stuffed with government paper, sitting on massive unrealized losses. There's only one buyer left with pockets deep enough to bail out the United States: China. The same China that American politicians spend their days threatening with tariffs and military confrontation. I have to pause here because the cognitive dissonance is staggering. By day, you have American generals talking about war in the Pacific. By night, you have Treasury officials calling Beijing, hat in hand, begging them not to sell their Treasury holdings. China currently holds roughly $780 billion in US debt. If they decided to liquidate even half of that position, American interest rates would explode overnight. The stock market, addicted to cheap money, would collapse. The housing market would freeze. The American economy would enter a death spiral. So while the headlines scream about getting tough with China, the reality behind closed doors is exactly the opposite. America is trapped in a financial dependency so profound that they cannot afford to truly confront their supposed enemy. This is what I call the debtor's paradox. You cannot declare war on your banker, you cannot sanction your creditor, you cannot threaten someone who holds the deed to your house. But here's the detail that keeps me awake at night. This isn't just about economics anymore. This is about the fundamental architecture of global power collapsing in real time. For 80 years, American hegemony rested on two pillars: the petrodollar system and the treasury bond market. Venezuela has just proven you can shatter the first pillar and thrive. China is proving that the second pillar was always an illusion. The petrodollar deal was elegant in its simplicity. America protects you militarily. You price your oil in dollars, forcing everyone to hold dollars to buy energy. But when you weaponize that system, when you use it for regime change and economic warfare, you destroy the trust that made it possible. The treasury bond market was even more crucial. The world central banks parked their reserves in American debt because it was supposed to be the safest asset on earth. But in 2022, when America froze Russian reserves overnight, they sent a message to every central banker on the planet: your supposedly safe assets are political weapons. The consequences are arriving faster than anyone anticipated. I'm watching bilateral trade agreements explode across the global south, Brazil selling soybeans to China for yuan, India buying Russian oil with rupees, Saudi Arabia accepting Chinese currency for energy sales. The BRICS expansion isn't just about creating an alternative club, it's about building alternative financial plumbing. They're constructing a parallel system that doesn't depend on American approval or American institutions. And the most beautiful irony, America is accelerating this process with every sanction, every threat, every attempt to weaponize economic interdependence. I've spent my career studying how empires die, and they never die from external conquest. They die from internal contradictions. They die when the cost of maintaining dominance exceeds the benefits of exercising it. They die when they become so desperate for resources that they have to negotiate with the very people they've spent years trying to destroy. That's exactly where America finds itself today, negotiating oil deals with Venezuela while calling Maduro a dictator, begging China to buy their debt while threatening China with economic warfare. This isn't strategy, this is the behavior of an empire in terminal decline, trying desperately to maintain privileges it no longer deserves and can no longer afford. The transition is already happening. While American politicians debate sanctions and tariffs, the world is quietly building a new economic order. An order based on mutual respect rather than unilateral dominance. An order where resources flow to those who need them, not those who threaten others. What I find most remarkable is how ordinary Americans are completely unaware of this drama unfolding. They see rising grocery prices, higher gas costs, but they don't connect these to their government's desperate diplomatic missions. They don't realize that every time they fill up their car, they're participating in Venezuela's revenge against American sanctions. I remember a conversation I had with a senior Federal Reserve official last month, off the record naturally. He told me something chilling. Yanis, we're not managing an economy anymore, we're managing a controlled demolition. Those were his exact words, a controlled demolition. But here's what keeps me up at night. What if the demolition isn't as controlled as they think? What if China decides to call America's bluff? What if Venezuela decides that even the new terms aren't good enough? What if the dominoes start falling faster than Washington can prop them up? I've watched currencies collapse, I've seen governments fall when their debt becomes unsustainable. But I've never seen a global reserve currency face this kind of existential pressure. When the dollar finally breaks, and it will break, the shockwaves will be unlike anything in modern history. The choice facing ordinary people everywhere is simple. You can cling to the mythology of American exceptionalism, or you can prepare for the reality of a multipolar world. Because whether American elites accept it or not, that world is already here. The desperate phone calls to Beijing will continue, the humiliating negotiations in Caracas will expand, and slowly, quietly, the dollar's grip on global commerce will continue to weaken until one day we wake up and realize the transition is complete. The question isn't whether American hegemony will end, the question is whether that ending will be graceful or catastrophic. And based on what I'm seeing in those hotel rooms at midnight, I'm not optimistic about grace.
You know, most of the times when you come across such videos, you may think it's kind of conspiracy theory, because that is how they have been able to program us to accept that anyone who does complete analysis on the world politics or things that happens around the world, they will find a way of throwing you with such word like this guy is just spreading fake conspiracy theory or conspiracy theory that has no facts, and that has been the trick. But for some time I've been following the world politics, and I'm getting to understand that anything that's normally called conspiracy theory sometimes have many truths in it. And when the man said uh, the world is changing and the new world order is shifting, I also remember how Canadian Prime Minister went to China recently and he mentioned of the same thing. And we have also witnessed the trend. Currently, most Western countries are shifting to China. They have started visiting China because they have realized the world that they built around them, the world that couldn't do anything without the Western countries, is changing, because China, Russia, and other countries that has the same capability, like the US, the UK, the German, all these countries are now doing things that will favor them. And if they don't join the moving boat or the moving ship, they will sink with the old ship. Recently, Trump wanted to take over Greenland, and through that we saw how after Europeans resisted this particular move, how Trump started imposing them with taxes, and it also made the Europeans started thinking twice. So we have seen how they are now shifting towards China, and even I heard that France President Emmanuel Macron made some revelation that it's about time they sort their differences with Russian president so that they can start trading with them. The Western ship is sinking. That's the fact. And I see this man's video as a video that have some truth in it. There are a lot of things that is happening behind the scenes. There are a lot of things that they don't want us to know, because they don't want us to showcase that they are sinking. Few years back, when China started coming to Africa and making deals with African leaders by doing barter trade, developing, giving them infrastructures, and also them taking resources, the Western countries started even imposing sanctions on some of the African countries. The Western countries were not happy. The Western countries was accusing China of probability of bringing some anti-human rights policies in Africa. But at the end of the day, most African countries did not resist. They decided to still trade with China, and it helped them to get some good infrastructure. The Africans got tired of Western countries because whenever they give you something small, they decide to impose their values, their policies in your economy, and somehow it was affecting many Africans and African countries. Today, these European countries who sees China as a country of no-go area or a country that don't believe in human rights has started running to them for economic deals, for trade deals. That's how it's about time, I'm always telling Africans, it's about time we also look at our own interests. We don't always have to act in the interests of our allies. So they will be say US is our ally, so we can know when it gets to when the going gets tough, US will act in the interest of themselves. They don't care about whatever other countries think. And we have seen that happening currently in US. Trump is acting in the interest of America. So it's about time every country acts in the interest of that particular country. Don't give a damn about any other country that think because you are allies, you have to listen to what we say. No, act in the interest of your citizens. And many Africans have to wake up and start acting in the interest of the continent. Please, if today is your first time coming to this channel, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification button so that anytime I upload any great content, you will be notified. I'm always your guy, Digraft Amoakon. Thanks for watching.